So, welcome to the Drive for Innovation, another innovation panel here in Raleigh, North Carolina. So let's start at the top with a really sort of general question, and it may seem too general, but once you get into it, I'm sure your answers will be very interesting. And that is, how do you structure your various companies for innovation, for successful innovation?
Well, Consert is a startup company, and a startup company by nature is a very innovative platform. I've been involved with startups most of my life, so I came on as maybe one of the elder statesmen to kind of add some adult behavior to a startup project. But the creativity comes about because of the need out in the marketplace. So our unique value, our unique management of our creativity is finding the secret sauce that actually builds the next generation of smart grid products. So the first year and a half, this project was in the basement of a founder's home. They went out and interviewed and communicated with the marketplace and tried to find out what was missing. They've decided that the communication backhaul is a legacy backhaul that is a private network that doesn't have a long-term value proposition. And our overall value proposition is based on the core competency or the core value that the network has to be long-term, public availability, and standards-based. So we started with that premise, and we delivered our solutions to the market based on using the premise of being a standards-based company. That in the utility market is a unique change from how they've been operating. Most of the utilities operate in a silo, most of the providers operate in a silo, and they build their projects independently in terms of moving forward. Most of us came out of either the communication industry or the tech industry, and we understand that what exploded the marketplace was standards. So we, as a philosophy, have used that to direct the company.
So you said you've been involved over your career with various startups. What have you learned along the way that you're applying now that's working to help you build products better, more efficiently, more profitably?
So it's really easy when you're in a creative process because so many smart people know how to innovate, and creating products for ourselves is one of the things that often takes us off the rails. So we have to invent products that actually solve a problem. So if you don't identify a clear problem and come up with a clear value proposition that solves that problem, then you're basically designing technology for yourself. And a lot of smart people are very capable of doing that.
Let's move to Ricardo, staying on this sort of small company startup, hard charging front. You're also addressing a fast-changing marketplace. How are you guys structuring to be competitive?
I think we have the benefit, the benefit that we have is from our users that are in the field of videography, that we get really quick feedback on what we're doing right and what we're doing wrong, because they'll make a video about it. And at that point, we get clued in really quickly, and we can time our design cycles a lot quicker and make changes and allow the people to use our device as best as they can. So people that are passionate about what they're using are going to the market, as the market segment sinks into how am I going to buy a display, or what camera do I want to buy, they all look in that same basic, they go to the social, they see what other people are using, and we're able to get in there and see what they're using and be able to innovate based on what they want, not on what we think they want or what we want them to have.
So the design cycle pressures must be enormous given that feedback.
That is our thing. Our cycle times are 6 to 8 months, and we got to go through and really quickly, so we have to create a really good platform and try to take it to its limits, and then at the same time we get the next platform ready as soon as it becomes available. So we take every platform to the limit, and then once we're good, we move on to the next one. And
so are you doing that because you use a modular design approach or other techniques to get more nimble?
Yeah, we use, so basically everybody is connected in one room, mechanical engineering, software engineers, we're all together, and we're all able to communicate very quickly on what we're trying to do, and if something that we can do or can't do, and put it down into a Google Doc or something where we can put in something for the next platform that we're able to touch into. So our innovation takes place at the manufacturing, at R&D, at the customer service, through all of the social sites, Twitter and all that, and we use all of that together to come up with how we're going to present ourselves and what we're going to do next.
Well, listening to Ricardo and Larry talk about the cycle times of innovation, your original question was how do we position ourselves for innovation? And because of our customers are the end-use utility customer and their end-use consumers, you and I as consumers of energy, and that really creates the challenge, not just from a technical innovation, but then how do you deliver a commercial solution in the current regulatory construct, which depending on the utility and their regulatory framework, the part of the country they're in, or even the part of the world, that could be measured in years. And that really is a challenge on how do you bring to the customer, the utility customer, innovative products that they then can incorporate in how they operate the distribution grid itself, but then also how they interface with their end-use consumer in an environment that is a regulatory one that requires, in many cases, a solution that's can be political. It can be a lot of different drivers, from environmental, from assets of infrastructure involving transmission and generation, distribution upgrades. So they really, a lot of the challenges that the utility customer faces, we have to position ourselves to help them innovate, and that's taken a lot of the solutions and technology products and services that the companies here today represent, and how do we then channel them to market in a practical way, so by the time they implement them, they're not obsolete, frankly. And that's as much of a commercial and regulatory challenge as it is a technical one.
I want to touch on that last part of your multifaceted challenges, because it just blows my mind. I mean, you have to design complex products that have to be effective years from now, right?
That's correct.
Not just because of the regulatory time frame that you referenced earlier, but the fact that these things are going to go into the home and they have to stay there for years and years and years. How do you design that way?
Well, in many respects, the meter is somewhat the poster child of that challenge, because it's transforming from what was for decades, frankly, considered where the grid ended. If you think about the utility, their paradigm, their endpoint was that meter. That's where it connected to the home. Well, now obviously that reach is extended to inside the home with devices, as we talked about, that the consumers interface with, but also from the meter back up to the substation. And this is where an equal amount of innovation, and probably in some respects more so, is occurring right now with the distribution automation solutions that up until just recently really haven't existed in a cost-effective way for the utility. If you think about the typical utility, once a circuit leaves their substation, for the most part, they don't have visibility of those assets. When I say visibility, the way we would think about connected devices and nodes, either on the internet or on networks, where you have almost real-time visibility of how those devices and assets are performing. So the convergence of automated metering infrastructure and technology with communications and the distribution grid itself is really providing a lot of exciting opportunity and innovation on the distribution side of the meter. And that's pretty exciting for us, and because it puts a company like Elster on both sides, within the consumer home, as well as with the distribution grid on the utility operator themselves. So very exciting, but very challenging at the same time.
So let's move on to Nick. Nick, tell us about what you're doing and how you guys are structuring yourselves to be innovators.
Yeah, so at Energy Micro, we're a young company. We were founded approximately 4 years ago, and so along the lines of what Larry was talking about, the idea of focusing your company on an end problem before you go and execute on anything. For us, that macro trend is really energy efficiency. And we, with our products, are out there allowing our end customers to reduce their energy footprint with their end products. So like with David's organization, talking about the metering endpoints, extending the battery life of the gas and the water meters inside the home with HVAC controls, lighting controls, wireless alarm and security, and portable medical products. So for us, it's that macro trend of energy efficiency for our end customers, and the focus behind that was really the reason to develop our products and bring them forth to the marketplace.
I'll throw this open to the larger crowd. I was reading a story in the Wall Street Journal earlier this year about innovation empowerment schemes. Most of them don't work, despite the best intentions of the managers who implement them, and they don't work for a variety of reasons. Do you guys have conscious, specific programs within your companies to bubble up innovation from the ranks, and what are they?
I think like Larry was saying, just as a startup, as a small company, you get to communicate better, and you have those formal and informal channels. And really in a startup, it's those informal channels that get, that lead to the innovation. The people that talk, maybe customer support are having lunch and they talk about something. And that I see that a lot at Small HD, where, things will get resolved at a lunch, because of somebody said something that somebody, that I caught on to, or somebody else that we would fix. And it's those types of things I think that bring, and I've been in several startups, and we all always had that kind of open, formal and informal type communication channels that I think led to a lot of good stuff.
And anybody else have incentive programs or anything like that?
So if you hire the right people for a startup, the personal identity of the person is to be a creative person, and they come to a startup because they want to do more than just have a job. They want to fulfill a passion and so forth. So programs at a startup level, or a high quality startup level, are not necessarily rewarded per se in the immediate gratitude of some sort of compensation. It's more about building a legacy of sorts. Okay, the right people who come to a new company are people who want to build their own personal legacy, and they want to be part of innovation. They want to be part of creativity. They want to be part of, again, birthing a company, birthing a product. And building a culture that rewards that is critical. So the culture is probably more important than any sort of incentive programs. And building that type of team is so critical. At the same time, the brightest people in the world can often make the simplest question more complex than necessary, right? So it is always that filter between when you ask a person what time it is, they tell you how to make a watch, right? As opposed to tell you what time it is. And it's really that balancing act between the two. Because if you stifle and all you want to know all the time is what time it is, and that person really wants to tell you to make a watch, you have to balance the two to make sure that that you continue to plug ahead. Because again, focus and vision and drive is critical for a successful startup company. At the same time, that raw creative talent that creates a new company, a new innovation, has to be nurtured as well. So it's a combination of balancing the two is always the criticality of a successful startup company. So there's a balance between the innovation and the autocrat responsibility of leadership. Say, no, we got to go, we got to move, we got to make a decision, and not worry about what ifs, or worry about the FUD factor, right?
David?
Yeah, I was saying that balancing act, I think, is a critical aspect on the way how we identify, bubble up, and then develop innovative solutions for utility customers. So you think about, in our industry, not that long ago, it was primarily a hardware manufacturing environment, the production of a meter for the measurement of energy, whether it be gas, electric, or water. Well, now it's that balance of having over a century of utility operations that Elster possesses in all three of those industries is critical, because, as I was saying earlier, what we have seen now is the convergence of the requirement to still deliver that basic functionality to utilities so they can render to their customers an accurate, reliable bill for the consumption of energy. But at the same time, that's only now one aspect of what a meter does. It's a critical aspect, but now it's a network node on a larger network of devices that extend both in the home, as I talked about, as well as on the grid itself. So that device has the same hardware requirements, but also communications requirements, network infrastructure. So we attract talent from all of those areas, both obviously hardware, firmware engineers, telecommunications and network systems engineers, and then with partnerships, we also bring to bear that expertise, whether it be consumer devices, in some cases developing, co-developing a solution directly with a utility themselves to meet either a regulatory requirement or some unique operational solution that they need for their consumers. So it really is a matter of balancing all of those variables to create a commercial product for the marketplace.
Nick, you guys, one of your values is low power design, presumably. Do you have formal, structured creativity incentivification programs around that?
So direct incentivize, no, but as a young company where all the employees are also shareholders, the long-term effect of that is there is an impact in your pocket down the road as those innovations come to the forefront and make their way out to our customers. From a product strategy perspective, everyone is also involved at Energy Micro in the long-term vision of where we want to take the company. For example, earlier this year as a company broken down into our individual functions, gathering as a group to put together a set of ideas that were then boiled up to the management team, presented to the board of directors, a small subsegment of that, and those now here in the second half of the year are part of that next 3-year vision for the company where we'll take our new products.
So I want to stay with you, but riff off something that Larry started to talk about, which was recruitment and hiring. What are you looking for when you're interviewing new engineering candidates that will fit into the whole innovation scheme? What kinds of personality traits?
So certainly they have to be at the top of their peers in terms of technology, innovation capability. So primarily our R&D headcount today is coming out of our headquarters in Oslo, Norway. So sourcing there from local talent is where our pipeline has come from thus far. We utilize the internship process quite heavily. So I don't believe any of our new engineers have come on board in the recent quarters that haven't in some way, shape, or form already done a trial run with us for a period of 3, 6, or 9 months. That for us has proved to be quite prudent in how we've expanded. As a young company, you can't misfire. You have to be quite sure of the headcount that you're bringing on board is going to be a real asset to the company going forward.
So I want to jump over to Larry because, again, this thread started with you, and there are a couple of different sort of basic personality types that hiring managers are looking for, right? You're looking for the people who have the skill sets that fit the requirement docs that you've put together, and then there are other people that say, I don't really care about that. I mean, it's nice that they have some engineering background in this particular area, but what I'm looking for is a nonconformist, for instance.
Well,
what do you look at?
Yeah, that's it. So everybody likes to play in the sandbox, right? All of us love to make sandcastles, and that's what development's all about. But at some point in time, that we have to commercialize everything. So we have to take that creative person and that creative process into a control process, and actually make sure that whatever we design conceptually, we deliver commercially is viable. So you need, again, it goes back to the personalities. You need a personality that has the capacity to be the leadership position, that brings this creativity, the solution to the forefront, and then you also need the right people to actually execute. So that lead follow type of concept of balancing of two is always the necessary evil or necessary formula for creating a good development team. But at the end of the day, the only reason we're in business is for one thing, is to make money. Right? We're not in here to make sandcastles. We all like to make sandcastles, but we have to actually make money. So sometimes the hardest thing to do is say to an engineer, great idea, but I can't commercialize it. And you really don't want to pop their bubbles, you don't want to disappoint them and so forth, because you want to keep them as highly motivated as possible. But at the same time, you actually do them a big favor by curtailing some of that creativity, because if you don't become commercially viable, he doesn't get his exit strategy on the stock options, he doesn't get his paycheck a few months later, and all those things. So it's always that discipline, the push and pull between a strong executive leadership team, even the middle management team, to the creative juices that have to flow.
So let me ask a slightly different version of the question and bring in Ricardo and David, and that is, are you finding the skill sets that you need today? And if not, how are you addressing that?
I think we're getting there. It's better now. When we hire somebody, we look for somebody that's passionate about what they're doing, somebody that knows the process on how to solve, very tough technical problems. Somebody that knows how to go to the forums, or for NXP or ARM or and gets and can ask questions or get whoever the evangelist is for that particular TI ARM or or the Snapdragon or whatever, so that they understand how the process is to get done that challenging problem. If they know that process, then we know they've got what it takes to get it done. We also fight with productization, and with our cycles, that's a must. So we started early on. So like we'll develop something on a development kit, and then we'll make a board, and we get everything going very early in product design. We have one guy focused on productizing. So if there's a guy that's trying to do the technical, get those tough technical challenges done, there's another guy right behind him trying to productize it, see if it's going to be a viable product. So that we just started about 6 months ago to start getting, because we were going longer and longer productization cycles, and it was killing us.
David, you're in sort of a cradle of university engineering greatness here. So no problem, or are there some challenges?
There's some. I mean, there's not. But we have somewhat the luxury because of the dynamics in the market. We're attracting and recruiting, especially engineering talent, from a variety of disciplines. I mean, literally working with universities on new innovation and new products themselves, whether that be on software or hardware development, as well as recruiting, and we attract employees from established companies as well, whether they be communications or other network companies, even our competitors it may be. So plenty of talent out there. I think it's challenging it again into the right area, so that, as Larry said, you have to have, at the end of the day, there has to be a commercial transaction, and that really brings us right back into the regulatory construct, and that is a challenge that we constantly we are constantly managing, because again, you can have the greatest widget. At the end of the day, the utility has to be able to deploy that, and they have to then be able to recover their costs and be able to pass those on accordingly. So it can be a long runway from innovation to deployment, but that overall process for us is more of a challenge than specific recruiting in individual technical areas.
You have way too many customers to have to satisfy, right? It's kind of unusual. You have to satisfy the utility, and then you have to hope that the utility, unlike, for instance, PG&E in California, isn't alienating part of its customer base, which is the ultimate customer, and scaring the wits out of them, right?
Exactly right. And in fact, that's the challenge in the industry today. Is there really is no one consensus or even definition of what the smart grid is. Most of us as consumers, just general consumers, probably aren't even aware of what their utility is doing with respect to smart grid. So they as an industry are still trying to formulate what their strategic plan is, and that creates a challenge, because that can look different state to state, region to region, certainly market to market as we go across the world. So that's a constant challenge that comes right back into the roadmap on how we develop and bring new product to market.
So what's the biggest challenge that you guys face today? What keeps you up at night from a higher perspective, whether it's business conditions or international competition or something like that, and then from a more technical engineering standpoint?
Our customers need regulatory certainty. I mean, a lot of the investments, whether you're dealing with a transmission line or a power station or even a full AMI smart grid deployment, those investments are going to span years. The planning, the deployment, and then the life cycle of those are going to be in the field for some time. So it's the lack of regulatory certainty on what the rules are, on when most of us as in our various companies, when you make investment decisions, you do so with an expectation of with a reasonable amount of risk. You're going to there's a reward, financial benefit. So having that makes it easier for our customers to plan for, and that really emanates from the national level down to the having our country really has not had a coordinated, comprehensive energy plan and strategy for decades, and this is something that goes back truly 30, 40 years, and that's still with us today. So at a macro level, the challenge is that regulatory uncertainty, because that certainly plays out at the national and then at the state and even local, state or city, regional level. More practically, where we are right now is you still have the stimulus funding that the DOE put in place several years ago. While that has been very positive in creating some initial momentum around some of the project deployments with smart grid, at the same time, what was launched an effort around the development of standards. The standards of whether it's interoperability, the standards of openness and interchangeable components, communications protocols. Well, as any of us know, if you're dealing with standards, the development of those are typically measured in years. So those two forces create some challenges as well on how do you innovate and deploy product in the short term, but at the same time not create stranded assets that because of standards or regulatory changes may be obsolete in 5 or 6 years. So we are very, very mindful, and that's something we work very closely with our customers to avoid.
Nick, do you have time zone challenges? Do you have tools availability challenges? What are you guys trying to tackle?
So for us, I think the biggest challenge is really staying at the forefront of technology innovation. At Energy Micro, we're targeting a number of different vertical customer end segments that all do seem to be moving up and to the right. Some of the macro trends that we're addressing with energy efficiency give us that benefit. We're selling into all the global regions, so as certain geographies wane and others grow faster, we're able to capitalize on that. So staying at the leading edge of technology is really our challenge. Right now we have a set of products that are 75% more energy efficient than our competition, but we are competing in space against several large players, and so making sure that at the development level our guys are quite focused on hitting their marks as far as schedules in the Gantt charts, if you will, and making sure that those products come out to market right first time are where we focus the most of our resources.
Everybody gets beaten up on cost all the time, but presumably you guys are pushing the power value proposition, and is that keeping you sort of out of that cost death spiral?
Absolutely. So the competitive differentiation and having a technology lead does allow us to be somewhat insulated from the cost pressures, but those don't leave us in a vacuum where we can charge whatever we would like to. We work with some of the best in the world, and we leverage their scale. So TSMC on the wafer fab front, ASE on packaging of our ICs, those leading global players, and along with logistics through Avnet, we're able to get that end cost to our customers down to a point that allows them to make that cost-benefit decision, and it's able to win us new customers.
Ricardo, what's keeping you up at night?
It's probably, I think we're selling more and more. It's going well for us, and it's probably a good problem to have. And it is, we're trying to get, before we had our manufacturing done in China with a partner, we're moving that to here, to this area. So R&D has been moved, and now we're moving some manufacturing to get a hold of quality. And we're trying to get that, as we move that over, and stuff. We want to make sure that we can improve and make things like we can at least as good as the quality that we've currently had, that we had to fight for to get out of our Chinese guy. So that our partner was, he could make it cheaper, but we would throw away 20% of our stock. And also, if they came back, anything that went wrong usually went wrong in New Zealand. So it was shipping costs were killing us. So now with having that here and bringing that here, I think we'll be able to sleep at night a little bit better.
Larry, how about you? What's on your mind?
So the conversation about cost and quality is often the conversation that starts way too late in the process. I'm a firm believer, an absolute believer, that cost and quality starts with the first design concept. If you allowed engineers to necessarily, again, allow engineers, but if you don't connect the dots with engineers, that every level of this decision from an engineering point of view adds to cost. Every engineering decision adds to quality potential in terms of manufacturability. From the moment you start conceptualizing the design to the final volume production, if you don't connect those dots, so they're all interwoven together at the earliest possible point, you're not going to compete globally. So often we get into this conversation about cost way too late. It starts, what ICs are we buying, what processes we're buying, how many different components we're going to add onto the bill of material, right? I know Admiral would like me to add as many components as possible, but the least amount of components on a bill of material is always the most important thing when you're designing a hardware platform. Every component needs management, every component needs support, and it all runs into the cost equation. It doesn't come into, it's not a manufacturing cycle issue. We confuse the conversation about cost. We fail in manufacturing because we're so late in the process of trying to understand cost. It starts from the first time we think about theoretically what that product's going to be like and where is it going to be when we're shipping 1 million of them. If you don't think like that, then you're really fooling yourself. And that's where you have to close the loop together.
When you sit back and look at innovation and competition at the national level, what worries you the most? I mean, you've already weighed in. Who else wants to weigh in on that?
So I think for us at Energy Micro, there is some similar concern as to our end customer base and their products losing their value, and so becoming products that are commoditized, and whether that's a meter, whether that's portable medical products that become heavily regulated, and the cost pressures then are put forth from a top-down command economy that don't allow them to extract their premium from the end consumer. That's certainly a concern from our end. It's frankly out of our control, so we look to do the best that we can in the areas that we're focused on, and until we see otherwise that long-term horizon isn't there for us to execute on the path that we've set forth.
The average consumer's understanding on most issues dealing with energy, the infrastructure, the generation, delivery, and then the consumption of energy is really dramatic, and we're seeing that play out even as we speak in some areas in California, up in the Northeast, around RF emissions, and it's for a variety of reasons. It has a political aspect to it, but most consumers do not understand energy, and for 100 years, frankly, that was by design. You've had kind of a nebulous rate. Energy costs the same whether it was in the middle of the night or at the peak time of the summer. That's starting to change, but most of us as consumers of energy probably wouldn't understand the kilowatt hour of energy, how it's used. And the average consumer, they have a difficult time relating that to their daily life. Where I hear this analogy a lot compared to communications, especially with wireless, but people have an inherent understanding of communications. They understand an airtime minute or so many text messages. But when you ask folks, does 1,100 kilowatt hours meet all your energy needs every month? You get a little bit of the deer in the headlight look, because they don't understand how that relates. They get lighting, cooling, cooking, heat, air conditioning, etc. But the measurement, and that's one of the things I think the technology and the solutions that we provide will help change, really help go a long way on educating consumers on how they use and consume energy, whether that's electricity, gas, or water. So I think that's an area that really has to begin at grade school.
Ricardo, big picture stuff that worries you deeply, although you don't look like a guy who worries a lot.
I think in a macro view, you know, I think our business area lends itself well into high schools. There's a lot, you know, who like video. It tends to be creative, and you know, young people, high school and into college, really enjoy that, and they participate in a lot of that. And you know, digital media is big in the high schools, and a lot of people like it. So if those guys can take it on to the college level, and you know, really get into, you know, doing from the creative point of view to the innovative technology point of view, it's, you know, it's there. If they want to do it, I think the path is there for them to do it if they're, you know, passionate about something that they're willing to spend time on. That, you know, may not be so glamorous now, but later on they could really reap the benefits.
Well,